Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Happy Sunday, everyone. So this video, I'm going to talk about what exactly is a SQL injection or SQL injection in cybersecurity. All right, particularly in cybersecurity offense. Okay, when it comes to defense, you'd be wanting to build defense against all these SQL injection attacks carried out by attackers or hackers. All right, firstly, in order for you to build a defense against these attacks in the form of SQL injection, you firstly need to know and understand what exactly this SQL injection is about and how this technique is used by the attacker or to compromise organization's database, okay, to get some sensitive information like uname and passwords. All right, so let's quickly get started with the explanation of what exactly SQL injection is about. So basically, SQL injection is a code injection technique that might destroy an organization's database, all right, and also compromise it, basically, all right. SQL injection is also one of the most common web hacking techniques used by attackers, all right. And also this SQL injection, what it means is the placement of malicious code in SQL statements via a web page input. Basically, web page input means your username and password field, okay, where you punch in your username and password, right? That is where these SQL statements are inputted. Okay, basically it's input. It's going to be inputted by an attacker, and he can get in, or he would be able to simply access the SQL database. All right, or the web application or the website itself, okay, by logging into the web application anonymously, and then or steal any sort of sensitive information from the web application itself. All right, and also SQL in web pages, right, which I was referring about the web page input, right? SQL injection usually occurs, right, when you ask a user for input, basically, all right, like their username or user IDs instead of their names and IDs. Basically, when you're trying to log into a web application or website, it will ask you for your username and password, not your actual first and last name. All right. So here in this field, what happens is an attacker can punch in a SQL statement, okay, that the owner of the SQL database shall run it unknowingly, or the database itself may run it unknowingly. As a result, what will happen is the database will get compromised, or the database will get exploited, all right, further by the attacker. Okay, so I have made an example here. Okay, so if you look at this example here, what happens is I've specified a select here, select statement, all right. So by adding a variable txt user id over here, all right, so to this select string, all right, what it does is the variable then is fetched from user input, all right, to get the request string over here, all right. So that's how this is how the SQL injection happens, guys. This is the best example of how it is done, all right, on a username field or a password field. Okay, then as a result, what happens then is an attacker can easily access the web application without even having a valid username and password, all right, which is otherwise also this particular example is otherwise also known as an authentication bypass, basically, all right. So let's quickly get further deeper into this topic. All right. So, and also what happens is I will also let you know what exactly are the potential dangers of using user input in SQL statements. All right. So basically, SQL injection based on one is equal to one is always true, guys. Okay. Let's take another example. Okay. For example, there is user ID field. Okay, on a web page or a website or a web application. Okay, 105 or 1 is equal to 1. All right, so what this does is so if you take this as an example just now for viewing, so the original purpose of this code is to create a SQL statement to select a user with a given user ID, all right, and if there is nothing to prevent a user from entering a wrong input, the user can enter some smart input like this, all right. When I refer to user, it's all about the attacker or the hacker or the bad actor, basically, all right. So if the attacker punches this in the user ID field, what will happen is there will be a SQL statement run on this SQL database, which will resemble like this. Okay, for everything, for all these payloads, right? The negative payloads will always have this select statement, basically, all right, to fetch the attacker the necessary information. Right, users is nothing but the table where is we are trying to point something, particularly the user ID. I'm going to then add a or operator. Then I'm just going to end the um, statement, okay, with a semicolon. All right. So this particular SQL query or statement above is valid. Okay. For example, if a website is vulnerable to SQL injection, if the attacker tries to run this payload, all right, we can call this as payload. Okay, 105 dot sorry or space 1 is equal to 1. All right, what will happen is immediately there will be the statement run on the SQL database, okay, which says select star from users table where user ID is equal to 105, or it contains 1 is equal to 1. Basically 1 is equal to 1 is nothing but it's true. All right, so you may see, or you may think that this particular example is obviously going to look dangerous. All right, and imagine, let's say here we are just trying to here the attacker is just trying to look into usernames or user ID. But imagine the same table, users table, contains passwords as well. What will happen? Let's take a look with another example, guys. Okay, so here what will happen is this the SQL statement will look somewhat like this. All right, again I'm just typing in front of you, select user ID, and then what the attacker will want to do is, along with the name or use associated, I mean, along with the name associated to a user ID, he will also try to get the password. All right, from users table where user ID is equals to 105, then he will specify an OR operator, then is 1 is equal to 1 colon semicolon, sorry. All right, and then if he's successfully able to exploit, or if he's successfully able to run this SQL statement, what will happen is then the hacker might also get access to all the usernames and passwords within a particular database. Okay, by simply inserting this 105 or 1 into 1, sorry, 1 is equal to 1 into the input field. Okay, where it asks for user ID. All right, without even having a valid username and password. All right, so this is how SQL injection, right, is very dangerous. Okay, so it's very important, basically, to protect all the databases within organizations. If it's a responsibility of all the SQL database administrators to protect their database by specifying SQL parameters, basically, right? That's how. I mean, that's the most easiest way to protect against protect database against these SQL injection vulnerabilities or SQL injection attacks. Okay, by simply adding a parameter, okay, against these user IDs. Basically, parameter means you will have that at, right, at the rate. That is how you tend to protect the SQL databases. All right, so that's how it's done, guys. So next example, right? Like when I say SQL injection based on, um, this will be another example. Basically, what happens is double quote is equal to double quote, right? Is always true. Just like how one is equal to one is always true. This particular payload is also always true. I mean, double quote is equal to double quote is also always true. All right. So for example, let's say a user login, right, to a website. For example, username, a web page asks for username and password, right? Just typing my first and last name here. All right, maybe we'll give my YouTube channel's name, saves everything. All right, and the password, let's say I have password admin. All right, so what will happen is, using this, I'm just going to show you an example of how a SQL query is going to work. Okay, mm, using this payload over here. Okay, I'm going to use this payload to probably exploit SQL injection on a database. All right, so let's quickly get started, guys. So I'm just going to type a code here. Uname is equal to mm, get request string, right? And then I'm just going to open a bracket. I'm just going to open a double quote, specify username, and then I'm going to close the statement by giving a semicolon, and I'm just going to put in here u pass, as in the user password, right, is equal to, then I'm just going to give the same here, get request string user password. Then SQL is equal to, so the actual, after the attacker tries to include this particular payload here on the user field, the SQL statement would look like something, will look like this. SQL is equal to, for everything there will be a select, right? Single quote select wildcard from users table where name is equal to double quote. This is going to open a double quote and then single quote, double quote, space, single quote. Then I will just give a space and then type plus, and then uname. Then again, I will specify plus, and then here what I'm going to do is going to specify a single quote and then double quote. All right, and then I'm just going to give and operator. Then pass is equal to is going to give a double quote, then a single quote. All right, and then I'm just going to give a plus, and then I'm going to specify another thing called upass. Then I'm going to specify plus. Then here what I'm going to do is it's going to specify single quote, double quote, and a single quote. Right. And what happens next is once this SQL statement is run against a database, the result will look something like this. All right. Select wildcard from users table where, apologies about my typing speed here, name is equal to, it will be double quotes, my first and last name of my YouTube channel. All right. And then I'm just going to give close it using the double quotes, and then I'm just going to enter and the password would be is equal to the actual password which I had specified or which I have. Okay, so this is the best example that defines how an attacker will use this particular payload. Double quote is equal to double quote in the user field or the username field basically. All right, and then if I would want to explain you how he might run it in a website on a website, then once he is able to exploit this, exploit it in the sense using burp suite, he can check if the website is indeed vulnerable to this SQL injection. If he does figure out that this payload is indeed working, what he will simply do is get into that website login page, and in the username and password field, what he will simply do is he will simply enter this payload here, double quote or double quote is equal to double quote, or he may do this as well, or double quote is equal to just a double quote. All right, and then password, it will be the same input where what he gave for username under username. All right, this or this. All right, and once he does that, what will happen is this particular payload that he has executed under username and password field, that will be a code that will be run on the SQL server. Okay, where the result will look like this, guys, after successfully exploiting the logon page. Okay, using the SQL injection code you can call, or SQL injection query or statement, whatever you can call. All right, the result will resemble like this: select star, then from users table where name is equal to double quote, or double quote is equal to double quote, and pass is equal to double quote, or double quote is equal to double quote. So basically, why an attacker is doing this, guys, is simply because he would want to bypass the authentication, all right, without even having valid username and password, all right? So that is what I'm going to show you. I mean, in a more practical sense, using Burp Suite, how to exploit this SQL injection vulnerability and build a defense against it from attackers. All right. Let me quickly see if the recorder is still available. All right. So the recorder is still available, and again, this particular SQL query is indeed valid. Okay, and will return all rows from the users table. All right, since or space double quote is equal to double quote will always be true. Okay, as in the SQL query that the user is running will be successfully run against the SQL database of the target host. All right, and then giving him access to bypass the login authentication page of a website or web application basically. All right, so there are further more topics into this, like we can run SQL injections based on bash SQL statements. Okay, and also I have previously mentioned how to prevent a web application or a web application's database against these SQL attacks by simply putting in SQL parameters as a protection. All right, just nothing but you call it as a I mean, you specify a SQL statement and then you just assign a marker as in the at the rate parameter. Okay, basically there is a at the rate. Um, let's say, for example, if I want to tell you in a practical sense, what I can do is I can take the same example. All right. So here, what I'm going to do is before this double quotes, I'm just going to put in an at the rate, all right? Or I can put two double, I mean two at the rates. So here what happens is there's a way of protecting your user IDs and passwords by just simply specifying at the rate, basically, all right? So particularly if you're just protecting the user IDs, that it will be sufficient enough because password there is no need of protecting it because already those passwords will be most of the times hashed, okay, and stored. So mostly user IDs are easily exploitable ones. Hence, if protecting the user ID uh, content is itself going to be working to the max benefit, right? And so that is how you do it, guys. Okay, and if you found, I really apologize if this video got dragged a bit. Okay, I just wanted to explain everything in a more slower sense or slower manner. Okay, for easily you grasping whatever I've shown in this video. So in the next video, it will be more theoretical sense. You will find it more interesting. And if you found this video helpful, please hit the upward button, guys, and don't forget to subscribe my channel for more useful content like this because cybersecurity. We will see you in the next video. Until then, stay safe, healthy, cheers, bye bye.